Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Cup Duet Reviews. My name is Jillian Robinson. I am the Associate Artistic Producer here at Cup of Hemlock Theatre, and today I am joined by one of our co-artistic producers, the wonderful Ryan Borochovitz. Ryan, how you doing today?
I'm doing all right, Jill. How are you?
I am doing well as well. Thank you very much. Today, Ryan and I have the absolute honor to discuss and unpack, as per usual, how we do on these things, the production Shaniqua in Abstraction. This is a new show that is written and performed by Bahia Watson, directed by Sabryn Rock. It is a Crow's Theatre production in association with Paul Watson Productions and Obsidian Theatre Company. And it's happening right now until April 28th at the Studio Theatre at Crow's. But before we dive into the abstract world that Bahia sets up for us, I'll go through our usual icebreaker. So, Ryan, what are you sipping with us for this episode?
So I am sipping in the cup. Hey, that's the show we're watching. Just water, because I actually recorded another episode of the cup right before we did this and had coffee in that one, and I don't need to over caffeinate myself. So just cup for now. How about you? What's in your cup? Peek behind the curtain there.
Exactly. Yeah. So we are recording this episode the morning after the opening night of this production. So I've got my natural light coming in to my right, which is, I always love doing these recordings with some natural light. And I'm also drinking water because I already have my morning coffee, but I am drinking it out of my Good Morning Beautiful mug. Usually we do these recordings at night, and I figured, let's put some morning spice to our life.
Nice.
Yeah. So just water for me as well. But okay. So, Ryan, again, following this per usual routine, why don't you sort of give us a little synopsis of what Shaniqua in Abstraction is?
Yeah, I will admit, this is a bit of a tough show to put into a box and describe concisely. Also, this will be the non-spoiler synopsis, and then we will get into more details following a spoiler shield very soon. So this is Bahia's solo show. She's the only performer in this, and I'm trying to think what the best way to do it justice is, because this really is a lot of individual vignettes, things that are strung together. But I would say that the overarching thing is that this is a collage of the contemporary Black experience, and particularly the experience of Black womanhood. Mostly, I would say, in Canada, but not necessarily exclusively hanging a hat on what makes things Canadian in this way. But as our title suggests, there is a central figure in this piece that we could call Shaniqua. And in order to think of how to describe this character, because I won't necessarily say that as I understood the piece, and this could be open to interpretation because it is very abstract in this way, that I think as we are presented to the beginning of the piece, Shaniqua is a role that our main, possibly unnamed character is auditioning for in some sort of movie or TV series. Shaniqua Jenkins, I believe her name is, and she's described as a Black woman and possibly embodying various different types of stereotypes. And as Bahia gets into the beginning of this audition for this role, she does things like girl, and various different versions of that single word, as in that's probably the only line that this character, probably a minor character, is going to get in whatever thing she's auditioning for. And how can she embody that the way that the director and casting director want, that accurately portrays what this character represents, even if this character perhaps is a stereotype in some way. And from there, we kind of get various harmonious interludes of Shaniqua was something that comes up here. And we see various versions of, I guess, what this Shaniqua figure might represent through the various ways that Bahia tells stories and does stand-up. There's a recurring stand-up bit called Sisterhood that she's performing at a stand-up club, and goes through sort of a more, I guess, vaguely Nanette-ish tormented view of, I'm trying to tell jokes about my lived experience, but things are getting too real and I don't know how I feel about this. There's all these various little episodes about various ideas of Black womanhood throughout history, relationship to contemporary politics and activism, and how one can be oneself, but also needing to represent and accurately represent a community in this way. And yeah, it goes all over the map. I feel like I'm not doing it proper justice by describing it in this way, but it really does Yeah, it is. I think I saw something in some of the ad copy that it's described as a kaleidoscopic experience. And I think that is a very apt way of viewing this, not strictly in a visual sense, although there is a lot of interesting projections and visuals throughout this. But it really is just creating a fractured view of different perspectives that essentially coalesce into a single solo experience.
Definitely.
How's that? Anything you'd like to add?
I thought that was wonderful. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I think as we go into it, post spoiler and also in our appraisal too, I think a lot of what you're describing to Ryan is this wonderful sort of marriage between Sabryn and Bahia bringing this piece to life. Like, I know I'm going to talk a lot about like the theatricality and the sort of journey and the transitionary journey that Bahia goes on throughout to sort of exude and present and project what you're describing. So yeah, so we'll get into all of that. But yeah, again, this show is happening right now at the studio space in Crows. And I always love that space because it is tight, it is small, but it is fascinating the sort of like explosive pieces that can occur on that stage. And a lot of the times it's very politically poignant pieces too. And yeah, so I'd love to also, as we sort of go along this discussion, like talk about the relationship and the proximity of audience to performer. And also if we want to bring up other pieces that are in the space too. But I just think it creates such an incubator for pieces like this that are, needed to be on our stages and relatable to some folks and there to bear witness from others. And again, we'll get into it as we kind of go through the nitty gritty. But yeah, I think Bahia, like I know Ryan, you and I have seen her we saw her at Uncle Vanya in Crows probably about a year ago now, or even farther.
I think even 2, maybe, or a year and a half. Yeah, possibly.
Fair. And time in the flat circle. And her Sonia was so phenomenal and heartbreaking and just like everything you would ever want Sonia to be. And it was like so phenomenal watching her in this piece, especially knowing like it is her piece and the multiple characters she brings to light, again, the use of theatricality, of her gesturing, of the text, like the poetry in the words that she uses. Again, I'm like rambling about this, again, not doing justice, but like, wow, Bahia Watson is a force. Like sitting in the audience, I'm like, okay, there isn't a single character or thing you can't do. You're phenomenal. And yeah, and again, I love watching fellow actors perform pieces that they wrote because there is that like extra level of vulnerability and personality. And yeah, it's lovely. It's kind of like another step into actinghood of, yeah, you're unpacking something that's not just a character. It's not just on the page. It's literally from within yourself. And so I just thought she really did justice to what she wrote.
No, I would agree with that. I think the central performance that she gives is more than anything the reason to see the show. There's a lot of great reasons to see this, but yeah, tour de force feels like such a cliche, but it really is. Like, I don't know how else to describe it, that she really puts herself and us through the ringer with every heel turn and character she portrays, the nuances within each character. It's essentially, as you said, we saw her in Uncle Vanya. Sonia is one of my favorite characters in all of Chekhov, and she was such a beautiful version of it. But this show shows that's just one of the many things she can do. But what we were presented here is such a diversity of characters, all so different from each other, so different from Sonia. And she essentially gave us a live demo reel of if there's any casting agents watching this show, that's almost about the politics of casting in a lot of ways, that, here's everything that she can do. Maybe not even everything, but a whole big swath of what she can do.
Yeah.
Everybody should be casting her and everything because she's fantastic and she's shown off so much of her talents in this piece.
Well, and even to speak to that, like I know Bahia's career is also quite robust in film and TV. First time I saw her was on The Handmaid's Tale, and phenomenal film actor as well. Again, Bahia, you do it all. We love it. But yeah, as you were saying earlier in your synopsis, Ryan, like there's a lot of projection for this piece as well. And again, to add this level of vulnerability too, a lot of the time it is just like clips from Bahia's auditions, or like she's endowing a different character at the same time as her character that's happening live on the stage, and that's projected on the back. So she's like extending herself on the sort of visual playing field as well. And yeah, just like putting all of her on display in using the sort of multimedia, again, just like added so many more fractals to this kaleidoscopic piece. And again, I think I speaking about that too, and how, yeah, we sort of are weaved between these sort of vignettes, and that kind of, yeah, they're different sort of characteristics that Bahia brings into the piece, but also like the style and the form, and also the genre of the theater that she chooses to present to each of these characters pivots and shifts as well. And again, I want to sort of tip my hat, to Sabryn Rock's direction in weaving these vignettes together. And because I really did feel there were like pendulum swings from like tragedy to comedy, from, you know, like the super physical vignette into just a sort of stoic, static, emotional vignette. And again, I would have loved to be a fly on the wall in the room of how much of that was Bahia bringing that to the table and how much of that was Sabryn sussing that out from what Bahia has presented and written. Yeah, I would have loved to kind of be in that room, right? Especially that's also something super exciting with when you're working as any other collaborator to the actor performer who is also the writer, is just kind of wondering, like, in that room, you know, was Bahia open to sort of shifting things around, or was it sort of set in stone and Sabryn was along for the ride? Or yeah, did the team of them kind of jig things around, and kind of how did this mosaic of a piece come to be? Yeah, maybe in like a future interview down the line or something with one or both of these artists, I would love to kind of pick their ear on that. But yeah, so I guess just kind of a thesis of what I just said there, like Sabryn tipping my hat to, I really thought it was a wonderful sort of pendulum swinging us between these vignettes. And again, that comes in the direction, right, of ensuring that there is enough of that sort of pull and push that exists in the text that he already wrote, but it's usually the director, right, that's kind of helping to suss that out. So yeah.
Nice. Yeah. No, we kind of said a lot already. Should we maybe, I feel like that's a good general appraisal. It's just a time to maybe put up our spoiler item that we'll discuss in a moment, and
Yes.
then
Yeah.
get more into the nitty gritty.
Sounds good. So our spoiler shield for this episode is a wooden chair. Yeah, that's what the spoiler shield is, and we'll maybe describe why when we're in the spoiler zone, which we are now. So yeah, so this is one of the set pieces that Bahia uses, and there's also a wooden bench, but there is a moment at the top of the piece where she sort of brings this chair in onto the space, center stage, and describes, like, you know, this is a wooden chair as you're seeing it, but like it can be multiple different chairs. It can be, you know, and it was just, it's kind of like, to me, it was like an actor kind of going back to, even I remember one of my courses in undergrad when you learn about like signs and signifiers of the stage, and literally like a chair is a chair is a chair. And like, it was like a very cool sort of like invitation into the piece of like, this is what you see, but like multiple different women that I'm going to portray are going to use this chair and sit on this chair and push this chair and be peeved by this chair. And it just was like a really lovely, again, like acknowledgement of, we're going into a piece of theater, acknowledgement of like, you're going to be seeing multiple things, acknowledgement of like, what you see is sturdy is maybe not, acknowledgement of this is the space we're in, and these are the sort of like inanimate cast members that are going to help me unpack all of this. So
yeah, chairs are very interesting and foundational to both Western philosophy and theater semiotics in particular. It's often when we're trying to describe the Platonic ideal of something to someone, you use like, oh, is the Platonic ideal of a chair that every carpenter is trying to create, and all chairs are some sort of just derivative of that Platonic ideal. And then, like, I guess what you brought up, I mentioned the essay that you read in one of your undergrad courses is the Freddie Rokin's "A chair is a chair is a chair," as you alluded, which sort of harped on the fact that chairs are often used in the theater semiotics discourse to talk about how, unlike literature where you are creating worlds out of words and the word is not the world, or painting where you create worlds out of brushstrokes, theater is a unique, interesting art form where the things that we used to create the fictional world are often very close real life counterparts to themselves. That you put a chair on the stage and it is a real chair, but it also has to do the labor of representing the fictional chair within the world. And we can stumble if we try to conflate the two, be like, oh, that is a chair and therefore it is the same chair in the fictional world, but a semiotic view would force you to be that it is the real chair is representing the fictional. And then phenomenologists came along later to refute the semioticians of that, oh, but it is a real chair and we recognize that, and theater is interestingly composed of this dissonance between recognizing the reality while trying to relate to the tension that exists with the fiction. And I think why I'm going into this, sorry, do you want to add on to that before?
Well, I think you're about to go into it, so I'll let you go.
Well, and I think this is so much of the discussion about the politics of casting in particular is that we do, maybe this is or isn't where you're going, I don't know, and I'd be happy to hear your thought too, but is that when we talk about authenticity in casting and the idea that, I think an interesting, I guess, example that we could bring into this is something like Hamilton, for example, where semiotically speaking, there's two ways you could be wrong in interpreting something like Hamilton and the way that it deals with race and casting. For example, you could say that, way of being wrong in number one is, I never realized that George Washington was black. Thank you, show, for telling me this. Whereas you realize, okay, a black actor is representing the white historical figure, but that doesn't mean that the figure was actually a black man. That's just the chair on stage is representing a different chair in the world, or the actor's body, etc. The way number two of being wrong is, I can't believe Lin-Manuel Miranda thinks that George Washington was black, which is also a way of misreading it for this is the same reason, is just because they have chosen to use this material to represent the fictional doesn't mean they think that it's an accurate representation of that. So, and I think when we're dealing with race and casting, representation on stage in all sorts of media, we seem to apply more of a phenomenological view than a semiotic view. We think that what appears on the stage has to reflect the piece. A word that I'm reluctant to use to describe this piece is autobiographical. So many solo shows often are and usually frame themselves as such, but I don't necessarily know if there's any way that Bahia is portraying herself or a version of herself in this piece. Is Shaniqua even the character she's playing, or is it a character that the character is auditioning for? And I'm sure like she brought all kinds of things of her own thoughts and ideas from her real life in here, but to mislabel this piece as being an autobiographical solo show in which Bahia is playing herself, working through her ideas, could be a semiotic misreading of the chair we are presented on stage. Sorry, I'm going off on all kinds of stuff.
You pulled the thoughts right out of my brain, because as you were really talking about the chair and unpacking and giving all of these, like, but it's this or it's that, and it was like, that's what Bahia does in her performance of, and I was going to mention that, Ryan, like there's moments sitting watching the show that you're like, it's so personable and so like literally she's addressing the audience. And I'm like, okay, are we just listening to Bahia? But then we're reminded that like, oh, this might just be an audition for the character who is playing Shaniqua, or like, yeah. So you're constantly in this sort of liminal space of, these are real thoughts, these are real things. And you could hear the audience humming and hawing and guffawing and laughing. So there is a reality relatability throughout the piece. But then, through theater magic and layers that can be presented on such a small stage space, you are catapulted into the world of fictionality potentially again. And again, just like the way that Sabryn and Bahia as a team, like spiraled us into these very like heavy, poetic, historically charged moments of what it means, to be a lot of the vignettes, like what it means to be a woman of color and all of the baggage that comes with that, or all of the sort of discourse that is surrounding that. And again, presenting it as in like everyone kind of bear witness to this story, but then also there's the moment when at the end when Bahia like literally steps off of the sort of hardwood floor space and onto the sort of Black Crowes Studio Theater border that's like the outside of the stage. And she's like almost like skipping or hopscotching like a young, and the text that goes with it is like a text of a child and sort of like indulging inner child. And it get again, like I feel like I'm spiraling talking about all this, but it's like these moments of reality and surreality and inner child and what is your identity and how is your identity perceived versus what is it actually, and just the way that everything is framed. And I know you mentioned like the stand-up comedy sisterhood bit. I loved that frame because it's something that the piece constantly goes back to, and it allows there to be a bit more of like a blunt, like a frustration of, and almost like a prose iteration of all of the like poetic ways that this character is trying to map out the landscape of their life and how they're perceived in life. And it's through this sort of stand-up comedy bit that we get like hit hard with blunt isms, and I feel like I'm talking about this like a kaleidoscope, but I feel like the piece sort of invites that. Yeah.
It's
jump in on anything.
No, I think you're right, and why it is sort of hard to, and I guess this isn't a critique of the show, anything what I'm about to say right now. I do think because it sort of throws so much at the audience, I'm struggling even like one day later to kind of sink my teeth into a lot of the specifics. And I don't know if that's maybe by design. I think it has a lot on its mind that it wants to say, and it says it very eloquently and covers so much stuff, but I do really find that it is all getting jumbled together like a kaleidoscope in this way, and why it is maybe hard for us to really articulate our thoughts of what we want to say about it, how we want to respond to it. We felt so many things, but how do we conjure them all up? I think this piece, again, I don't want to say this as a critique, but it's sort of, I think by design, it defies categorization in any sort of simple way. It defies linear narrative. But I do also think that, you and I both sort of indicated as we were leaving that it maybe goes on a little too long at some points. I think I counted at least 3 different points where I felt like it was almost going to end and then it didn't. Each of the individual vignettes at various times maybe felt like they could have been shortened a little way or ended a little earlier. Just, again, I don't want to say these as like major critiques. This is like the first production, I believe, of this new work that maybe is still in development a little bit. But it essentially assaults its audience with so much stimulating material that I feel bad that I am struggling to remember a lot of the specifics even one day later. And I do think maybe some elements of the form are inhibiting that, but then you can always pick out the part that, but this really resonated with me. And, people have definitely like had audible reactions, like you said, to some certain line that really stuck out or ideas. I don't know, like I don't feel no need to co-sign this.
No, I agree with you as well. I also feel like this piece will just percolate for sure. I find that with a lot of pieces too that, challenge form. And this happens a lot with solo shows too, because it already being one actor on stage, like that already to me kind of like defies a form in some shape or form. And so, I feel like this piece could percolate. I do agree with you. There were some moments that, a length of the vignette, I think like it's like, and I could almost feel in the audience as well, like we were almost at like an emotional apex, and then it kept going. And again, I don't want to say that's necessarily a bad thing, because I think there is that level of, it's okay that my feelings aren't matching up with the feelings of the character or the feelings of the actor, right? It's placing me in sort of an uncomfortable, and not necessarily uncomfortable in like a content thing, just uncomfortable in the form. So I don't think this is a bad thing, but I do feel like there were moments, where the length of vignettes were a bit long. But again, I'm struggling to say like it's bad because
No, yeah,
it
it's not.
exists the way that it exists. Like this piece just breathes as what this piece is too, right? So I don't want to take that oxygen away, but I guess yeah, that would be like a tiny
Yeah, it's
thing of my experience.
and it's just, I guess, it's a matter of focus. Is the point of this piece to like, I have something I want to say and you need to hear it, or is the point that I'm going to say everything I have and you'll take from it what you can?
Right.
And it could be either, and I think either works. I just feel, and again, I know perhaps, there is a very specific cultural context with this piece that perhaps you and I are not the target audience that
Of
it
course,
needs to
yeah.
accommodate. And I'm, being very cognizant of that. And I'm not trying to say that this piece needs to please my aesthetic sensibilities specifically. But yeah, it is just different approaches to the same material. And it's either works, good choice, better choice, not good choice, bad choice.
Yeah. I think to speak to that too, I was going to bring this up, and this is a great kind of segue of, yeah, a lot of this piece sort of, centers around women of color. And there's also even a vignette that sort of in sort of like a talk show satirical debate between like a dark skinned woman and a light skinned woman is how Bahia sort of maps her character's host, which is so amazing. That's, I think, one of my favorite characters she endows, maps out. And so a lot of it's centered around like being a woman of color, and especially a woman of color in this industry. But the piece does a phenomenal job of talking. I think you and we mentioned this, Ryan, like on our journey home from the show, of like universally placing this very specific sort of view, universally sort of poking and mapping out how this experience of like a woman of color is how it's affected by men of color, how it's affected by white women, how it's affected by white men, how it's in. So like there is literally everybody who sees this piece is going to be reminded or prodded or challenged or encouraged to think of their role in sort of this world that Bahia has set up, or think of how their privilege or representation can affect. And again, it's a lot of this is mapped out in these different sort of character interactions that she maps out for us. But I know, Ryan, we talked about too, like this piece within the piece. It wasn't like my brain was wandering from the piece, but my brain was thinking about things in life or past experiences while watching the piece. And that to me is like the Brecht's V effect on blast. Cause I'm like, if I'm already doing that like post-alienation thought process while digesting the piece, like that's brilliant. Like,
you could tell we both went to theater school.
I know, right? This is, but like, I just, like talk about trusting your audience and really, like you said, like blasting them with so much information and stimulating them and trusting that, or not trusting and not caring that, I'm going to make you hear things and think about things, and I'm not going to wait for you to do that once the piece is done. I'm going to have you sit and do that with others.
Yeah. I think you're saying a lot of great things. So if I maybe just
Please,
in light of a lot of this, I guess I kind of want to amend a comment I made a moment ago, because I actually don't know if it's true that we're not the target demographic for this. I don't think this show has a target demographic. I think everybody will get something different from it based on their own experience. I think, based on one's own racial, ethnic, cultural identity, one will resonate with certain things differently than others, whether it's agreement or perhaps learning or witnessing it, or the words that you used a moment ago. And really just, we all have something to take away from this. And what I was trying to say earlier was less that it, this show isn't for us as white people. I think it very much is. It just in a different way that it is speaking to people from other identities. And I think also that I'm trying to think how I quite want to phrase this, but it's what you were saying a moment ago about how, the mind wanders, not because the show wasn't interesting, but because it's giving us so much to think about that we can't help thinking about it and then unfortunately missing perhaps the next thing, or you're still chewing on your thoughts from the last vignette by the time we've moved on to the next one, and you want to be, I got to be paying attention because the next one seems interesting too. But what is my mind doing with the things that I just hear? Yeah, there's so much that I think everybody can take away from this, and not in like a kumbaya, everyone is universal kind of way, but in a we all have something culturally specific from our own positionality that we can take and learn and develop from this, regardless of who you are and how you relate to it in those ways.
Yeah. And there's an element of like, keep up. Like, it's like, of, oh my goodness, like, and your brain is scrambled. Okay, figure it out. Like, keep up. Or, yeah. And again, I want to go back to like the use of just bare bones theatricality in this. Like, Bahia's gesturing and physicality. Like, there's a moment where she's crawling on the floor. There's, the whole like exotic starter pack comedy moment was like freaking brilliant. And like just in so many gestures she was using that in that moment. And then I already mentioned too, like the like just sitting in the chair and taking in the audience. Like there were so many like boxes checked of how do we physicalize this piece in a way that is authentic to what the character needs, authentic to what Bahia wants done with the piece, but also in a way that is accessible to the audience, but not caring that it's also accessible to the audience too. Like, and then I think just to add on top of it too, like the lighting and the soundscape just adds more layers. This already very layered piece. Again, it was like using live theater. And again, as I mentioned, like Bahia and Sabryn both being very affluent in film and TV. It's really lovely. Like the extent to which they use theater to put this piece on in, it's not that they're like not known to theater, like they're also theatrical actors as well, but knowing that they're coming into this with a lot of film and TV thing too, it's just like, oh, cool. And like they're back on the stage and they're using like every single tendril of what theater is to put this piece on. And it's a beautiful reminder that liveness and sitting in that audience in that sort of like rectangle U wide thrust that the Crow's studio provides us. Yeah, it's sitting with other bodies around you, taking in this content and this piece and feeling other people's energies and what other people are relating to. Like, you're not going to get that by watching this on a screen. There are screens in the background of this, but like it's the element of live theater. It goes back to the beginning of this conversation of a chair is a chair is a chair. And it's like that layer of emotionality and physicality, like you are only get that if you are sitting in liveness. And
yeah. Agreed. And like, I think, you said it so perfectly there that the screens are there, but they're in the background. They aren't what's being foregrounded by this piece. They complement the liveness, not distract from it. And I think I guess it's interesting in this way also because, sorry, so many of my thoughts like, ooh, they're getting there because this piece just does that. And then you're trying to quite think how to articulate them that, why kaleidoscopic both is and is not a very apt way of describing this piece is because, as much as there is a heavy element of projection in it, it's not as much of a visual feast as you would expect something that you describe as kaleidoscopic as being. There is movement, there is projections, but at the end of the day, it really is just being in the presence of someone who has a lot on her mind and a very beautiful and eloquent and talented way of conveying those ideas and really just showing off what she can do. And in a piece that's about the politics of casting and being limited and showing off what you can do in the way because of certain preconceived notions about what somebody who looks like you is or can be, this piece kicks down every preconception that people may or may not have about that to show that there is so much more that we are missing out on if we don't allow these stories to be presented in such a beautiful way.
And what a phenomenal vehicle like Bahia Watson to do this, because going back to pieces we mentioned, Sonia and Uncle Vanya and Brianna, I think is their character's name in Handmaid's Tale, opposite in regards to character range. You have the sort of innocent, shy, timid Sonia, who is very childlike in a sense. And even the quality and tone of Bahia Watson's voice is when she does play younger characters or has like a joyful essence to her. It it is such a joy to hear her. And then paired with her character in Handmaid's Tale, who is like there supportive, but like part of the squad that is gritty and willing to go to the ends of the earth to make things right and to confront justice. And again, seeing this piece, and I'm going back to that moment of her unpacking that sort of inner child monologue and adding like sweetness to what she's saying, but then paired to the moments where she's playing the character that is in an abusive situation, relationship, and she's gutturally yelling at the floor. I'm like, this human being, this actor is like also just like what a beautiful shell of her just absolutely playgrounding the hell, there's my swear word, out of her ability, and how it's like how she's perceived or all of the, it just puts also into perspective of like the capacity that she has to be a vehicle for these types of stories and to take us from the most youthful sort of innocence to the guttural, yeah, like warrior-esque strength. And yeah, comedy to tragedy, like again, but he has it all. Wow, this piece.
I feel like, yes, I already liked the piece leaving it last night, but I feel like just talking through it with you now, I've given even so much more of an appreciation and thinking through, this is a
Definitely.
remarkable piece, brilliant performer, brilliant writing, brilliant directing, brilliant whole aesthetic vibe of all the design elements. Yeah, people should check this out. It's interesting. And there's, there's something for everyone, and there is so many everyone's in this piece in the way that she presents a very broad swath of a large spectrum of cultural identity without ever subduing her own individuality in service of that more collective scope.
Yep,
Mhm.
absolutely. I think we can
Yeah.
cap it off there. Definitely go see this show. Again, this is Shaniqua and Abstraction. It is written and performed by Bahia Watson, directed by Sabryn Rock. It's happening right now at Crow's Theater and their studio theater. It's a Crow's Theater production in association with Paul Watson Productions and Obsidian Theater Company. And it's happening now until April 28th. So we will pop ticket information, everything in the description below, as per usual. And great, kind of taking us out in our usual routine and how we go about these things. Ryan, why don't you go ahead and either plug yourself or us?
No need to plug myself because I'm not interesting. But you know what is interesting? The Cup, the show you're watching slash listening to right now. So if you like me and my theater thoughts, they tend to all live here. You might hear me go on about semiotics in other episodes as well. But if you like Cup of Hemlock, we are at COH Theater on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, not calling it the other thing. We've had our fun. It is Cup of Hemlock Theater on YouTube, Cup of Hemlock Theater podcast, and all the podcast places. You're probably already encountering this in one of those, so check out other episodes. Subscribe, like, share, comment, do all the stuff. How about you, Jill? Where can people find and follow you specifically?
I always feel like it's like that fine print at the bottom. It's like, oh, rights reserved. Yes, so people can find and follow me at my artist Instagram account is jillian.robinson96. I actually have two projects upcoming down the line, so keep your eyes peeled for those. One of them is A Goat, a Ghost, and a Guinness. This is a new play that the Flair Productions is putting on in Al Green Theater in May. And the other one I'm doing is a new musical written and helmed by Mateo Chavez Lewis. It's called Tommy Rhodes. I will be playing the lead, Leslie Rhodes, and that's going to be going up at the Red Sandcastle Theater in June. So, yeah, keep your eyes peeled to the page for more deets on that if you're interested. But all in all, go continue seeing amazing theater. Toronto has so many shows blossoming in this spring 2024 season, and there's going to be lots more episodes coming down the line. So put your butts in all of the seats of these productions. And yeah, I hope everyone is sort of segueing into spring beautifully. And we will catch you on the next episode of The Cup. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.